All right, so where we should be right now on this project, this tic-tac-toe project, is that we can run our tic-tac-toe game and we get to see the hash marks, and when we click in a location we get the X that shows up there. So if I click there I get the X there, if I click there I get the X there. The way that we basically got that to work was we had this draw method inside of our tic-tac-toe class that draws the 4 lines and then makes a decision about X1. Okay, so X1 is just declared up here as an X mark. Okay, so we're saying if it's not null, then go ahead and draw it. So when it is null, we're not going to draw it. We're not even going to try to draw it. Okay, but then when the mouse is clicked, we're going to figure out where the mouse was clicked, create that X mark called X1, and then repaint. So, you know, just to really quickly review that, right now X1 is null. Okay, so we're not drawing it. When I click, I'm instantiating X1 as a new X mark, and so it's going to be at the position that the mouse was clicked at, and now it's repainting. So now it's going to draw these 4 lines again, and now that X1 is not null, it is an object, now it gets drawn. Okay, so wherever I click, that's happening. So now it's a new X mark right there. X1 is a new X mark right there. Okay, so let's talk about what we want to do next. So what we'd like to do next is get it so that when I click in this box, right, when I click in this box, the X gets centered in that box. In other words, if I look at this, right, if I click anywhere in here, I get an X that looks like that, no matter where I click in there. Okay? So, the one skill that you guys should be figuring out here, the one skill that you should gain from this class, even if you don't learn any programming, okay, is being able to decompose a problem. Okay, that's what we really want to practice in this class. We want to be able to take a big problem and break it down into smaller problems until we can solve it. Okay, so that's really important. All right, so what we want to do with this is we want to say, okay, well, we have 9 boxes, right? We want to center the X in each of those boxes, but let's just focus on one box. Because if we can figure that out, then we can probably go to the next one and figure that one out. Okay, so then when we look at that one box, we should look at this and say to ourselves, like, okay, well, that box has 2 dimensions, right? Looks like it has an X dimension with some key points right here and here. And there's some other key points on that line that I might care about later on. And it also has a Y dimension, okay, right there, and that has some key points with some other points that I might care about later on. All right? So breaking this down into 2 dimensions kind of helps us, okay? So what we can do is we can say, like, well, I know that this point right here is 0, right? And then this point right here in terms of X, what is this point right here? What is this line drawn at in terms of X? Okay, so some of you are saying 170. Okay? And then what I want to do is I want to make an inequality. I want to write a set of inequalities that describes that shaded region. So inequalities, remember, are less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, not equal to, or equal to. And what I want to do is for the X direction, basically, I want to talk about what can I do to define all of these shaded points on this number line. Okay? So what is true about all of those shaded points on that number line? They're greater than or equal to 0. And what? Yeah. So we could say and they're X values that are less than 170. Okay? You could say less than or equal to, but I'm just going to simplify it to say less than 170. All right? So that's really good. Okay? Let's transfer that over to the program. Okay? So in the program, what we would do is we would say when the mouse is clicked, we want to know where it was clicked. Okay, and I'm going to do something a little bit different in here than what we've been doing before. So I'm going to change the name of this variable. Okay, I'm going to change X, and I'm going to say that this is the mouse X. Okay, that's where the mouse got clicked. Okay, so that's going to be mouse Y right there. That's where the mouse got clicked. Okay, and what I'm trying to determine is figure out when the mouse is clicked, where should the mark go? Does that make sense? All right. So if mouse X, we said, is greater than or equal to 0, and mouse X is less than 170. So that's the first part of our condition right there. Okay. So what do I want to be true about x1? Where do I want x1 to be created if that part of that condition is true? Yeah. Okay, so he said 90, 90, all right? And let's just talk about where that comes from. So we did some planning earlier on, right? And in our planning, we said basically the center of this square, right, is 90, 90. So if I click anywhere inside of here, I should have my X or whatever mark I'm making at that point 90, 90. Okay, so let's go back to here and let's say now I want my X mark to be at 90, 90. All right, let's see if that worked. Okay, so if I click over here, or over there, or over there, or over there, over there, nothing happens. And the reason that nothing is happening is because I'm only instantiating, I'm only creating my X mark if the mouse's X is between 0 and 170, basically. Okay? But if I click here, that's true, but I'm still making that X up there. You understand what I'm saying here? Okay, so I clicked down here and the X showed up there. So that's not quite right yet, all right? But we're pretty close, okay? So let's go back to here, and let's talk about what else we need to add on to that. So I was able to click right here, and I got my X to show up there. But I only want that X to show up there when I click inside of this box. So what else do I have to define so that I can say, like, all right, well, for sure that thing should show up there? I got to define the y, right? Because this y value isn't accurate, okay? I'm only determining things about x here, so I also have to determine something about y. Okay, so what has to be true about y? Yeah. Okay, so y has to be less than 70 as well. Okay, so y has to be less than 170. Okay, so why didn't you say that y has to be greater than or equal to 0? Okay, so that's a good question, right? It's a question that maybe we should answer in a little bit here. Okay, but let's go ahead and say that we also want y to be less than 170. So here's the line where y equals 170, right? Here's the line where y equals 0. Basically, we're saying we want to be up here. We want these things to be true, and we want this thing to be true so that we're in this shaded area. Okay? So let's go over here and let's add that onto this. We're going to say and mouse y has to be less than 170. Okay? So now let's run this again and see what works. Okay, so if I click here, again, nothing's happening. My x values are not right. Okay, click here. Last time that made my x in here. Okay, click there. That would have made my x the last time. Now I've added that line that says y has to be basically above this line here. So when I click in there, now I get my x. Okay, so hopefully that's not too confusing for you. All right. And so we're making that condition. Now I want to go back to that idea of why do we need to say mouse is greater than or equal to 0? Okay, or the x is greater than or equal to 0. So I'm going to say this. you probably don't need that in there. Okay? And the reason is, here's the line where x equals 0, right? If I'm over here, where x would be negative, then I'm not in the game anymore, right? So there's really no way for me to click the mouse in a position that's negative, okay? So we can get rid of this part of it. But it's still good that you were thinking about it, because it's true that it was greater than or equal to 0, but like physically it's impossible for me to actually click in a spot that's not greater than or equal to 0. So let's reduce this a little bit and just get rid of that and say this. Okay? So far so good? All right. Let's do one more here. All right? Let's go back to this. I'm just going to use this one down here. And let's say now that we want to do the same sort of thing for this box. Okay, we want to define what's true about this box. So who can tell me one thing that's true about that box? Yeah. X is less than 170? X is greater than 170, okay? So we're going to say one thing that's true right there is that X is greater than 170, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to color code this so that you guys get a little better understanding of what's going on, okay? So X is greater than 170 there. All of these values define where X is greater than 170, okay? So this is the line what X equals 170. So all of these things over here are greater than 170. What's another thing that's true inside of that box? Yep. X is less than 330. Okay, so on this box, this is the point 170. This is the point 330. Okay, so let's do that in green. Nope, that's not green. This is green. Okay, X is less than 330. Okay, so if I shade that in green, all of these, it's kind of a dull green, all of these points are less than 330. So now we have an overlap here. Okay, so if I say that both X is greater than 170 and X is less than 330, where I have an overlap is where both of those things are true. So that middle column, both of those things are true. Okay, and now I want to narrow it down to just this box. So what's another thing that's true about that area? What's one more thing that's true about that box? Yeah. So y is less than 170. Okay, so here we have y is 170, y is 330. And if I shade where y is less than 170, we're going to get all of that. And if we'd say that all three of these have to be true, then we're only in the box that have all three parts shaded. The pink, the green, and the red. And that's just that box. So that's how we want to kind of think about this. That's how we want to combine these statements to say, okay, let's single out one particular box in this problem. Okay, so let's go back over to the program. And let's say here, so what we just said was if mouse X is greater than 170 and mouse X is less than 330 and mouse Y is less than 170, then we're going to make X1 again. We're going to make X1 be a new X mark, and then we got to go back to our planning to figure out where that X mark should be. Okay, so where should that X mark be if it's in that top left hand, or I'm sorry, that top middle area? Anybody know just off the top of your head what that center point is? So X equals 250. Y equals what? Y equals 90. Okay, so we're going to use that point, 250, 90, for my X mark in that case. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. So if I click here, I didn't click in either of those. If I click here, no. If I click here, I'm getting it centered there. Click over there, nothing happens. If I click here, now it's centering in that mark, or that square, I should say. Okay, so far so good. All right, so you should be able to kind of imagine for yourself that we could have like 9 of these conditions in 9 different positions that my mark could go in. Okay, this isn't, listen, this isn't the most efficient way of doing this, but it's an okay way of doing it. All right, and we can talk later about efficiency, but I really want you to just kind of get this thing to work right now. Okay, however, there's a better way of thinking about this, because what you should imagine right now is that you're going to say like, all right, well, if this is true, make the X mark there. If that's true, make the X mark there. If the other thing is true, like, and we're going to have 9 of those, right? Okay, but for every one of those, we're making an X mark. Okay, I want you to look back on, think about what we did when we did quadrant color. Okay, if you can remember doing quadrant color, maybe what you remember is that when you did this, you set the color to blue and then you filled in an oval. And then you went here and you said set the color to green and then fill an oval. Red, fill an oval. Magenta, fill an oval. And I pointed out to you guys that it really makes sense to just go ahead and use this decision tree to set the color and then always fill an oval at the end. Does that make sense? Okay? And that's the same situation that we're in over here. Really, what we're trying to do with these decisions is figure out what? What's changing? What's changing between here and here? Like, what changes between line 29 and line 31? The location, right? So what we're really trying to do is figure out the location via these decisions, okay? And we know that we're going to make an X mark, right? Or maybe we're going to make an O mark, but we know that we're going to make some kind of mark, okay? So what I think you should do is you should make 2 more variables up here, okay? Your mark X, and let's just set it equal to some negative number, so it's off the board, okay? And mark Y equal to some negative number, so it's off the board, okay? So this is going to be the position of our mark, or the mark, I should say, okay? And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, if the mouse was clicked in less than 170 for X and less than 170 for Y, then mark X should equal 90. And mark Y should equal 90. Okay? Now listen, because we're doing 2 things in here, we need to have brackets. So I'm going to put a bracket there and a bracket there. Okay? What's X and Y going to be when this is true? The mouse X is between 170 and 330 and the Y is less than 170. What's mark X going to be in that case? Mark X is going to be 250, right? So let's get rid of this, what we have right there, and let's put a bracket in there and then go, now our mark X is going to equal 250 and our mark Y is going to equal 90. Okay? And just like we said for quadrant color, after we figure out where the thing should go, let's go ahead and create that thing. Let's go ahead and create X1. And where are we going to create it? Wherever mark X is and wherever mark Y is. Okay? So this is kind of a, like I said, it's a review of something that we've done before, but it's a new application of that same idea, right? So now you're going to have basically 9 of these. You're going to have different mark X and mark Y, but we're always, for right now, making X1. Eventually, we're going to decide what kind of mark should we make. Should we make an X mark? Should we make an O mark? How do we, we'll make that decision later. But hopefully this is, hopefully the way I explain that is helping you make sense of how to solve this problem.